In this section, we will talk about target price theory, and how our indicator can help interpret this theory correctly. First, we move our indicator, so that it will not disturb us on the chart. As you can see, there is no longer the Chikou span line, which is very important during the analysis, but when we do the measurements it can be a bit disturbing. Let's open the indicator on the current measurement panel, and make the first measurement test. With the current measurement, we need to identify the A, B, C points. The impulse and correction. Click on these points and here are all the measurements. For moving on to measurements and target theory, we need to find the denying and habitual ranges measurements, which will be useful when we look for the point where the price should arrive. In this case, I have identified two impulses, with a magnitude of 1565 points, and a duration of 25 days. First, second impulse magnitude of 1639 points and duration of 19 days. Let's go back to our current measurement panel, and do our measurement of points A, B and C. Here, we can immediately appreciate the fact that the habitual ranges show us where the price usually changes direction. Of course, we can hide the descriptions of the denying and habitual ranges. Let's move on to our current chart, where I will describe all buttons, one after the other, what they are for, and how we interpret them. The first button, as we have seen before, is used to hide all calculations related to this theory. If I'm only interested in the time theory, just press the modify button yes or no, and all the measurements related to the targets are hidden. Obviously, at this point I am more interested in the targets than the time theory, so I press the modify button to hide all the time measurements, and focus on the targets. The second button is very important, because before making the measurements, we must make the decision whether we do the measurements with price extremes, or on candle closures. The difference is huge. If we want to do the calculations based on the closing of the candles, just click on the modify button, and again the E button. We see that it changes the measurement of the targets that are calculated based on the closing of the candles and not on the maximum or minimum reached by the price in this period. In my practice, the maximum and minimums usually work very well as the right points for the measurements. The third button shows or hides the multiplied targets from the theory of targets. We know that there are simple targets, such as the NT, V, E, N target. Some of these targets can be multiplied, such as the V target. Twice target V means the magnitude and points of target V multiplied by 2. 3 times multiplied target V, we have the magnitude of target V plus another magnitude. The multiplied targets can be visible or hidden. Complete target theory also takes into consideration the middle targets. For example, an NT target plus V target divided by 2, or target N plus NT divided by 2. As we can see, the targets can be multiplied, but can also be summed and divided by 2. The fourth button allows you to display or hide these values. On our graph, we see the values of V plus NT divided of 2. It is evident that on these targets, the price always reacts. The price reached the intermediate target, reacted, and after the breaking of this target it reached the target V and N, from which it bounced back permanently. The fifth button of the row dedicated to the price target is the button that hides or shows the calculations of the denying and habitual ranges. As always, in these cases just press the modify button, DHR button, and again modify, and the calculation of denying and habitual ranges will be hidden. Again, we repeat the same operation, and these calculations are visible. The last button shows us the intermediate targets, calculated based on the NT target. These calculations can be easily hidden because often the NT target is in particular places, creating some clutter on the graph. Again, by clicking on the modify button and then TAF button, our targets that have been calculated according to the NT target are hidden. As for our indicator and target theory on the daily chart is all. Now let's see how these theories and our indicator work on different time frames. The creator of this strategy dedicated an entire book to weekly candles. He says that his theories, they work very well on this time frame. Let's take the German DAX index on weekly candles as an example. As always, we have to identify an impulse and the correction, that is points A, B, C. Here we can immediately observe the precision of the cycles between points A and B of 28 weeks and the maximum reached by this index after 28 weeks from point C. Now, we add the intermediate targets to our calculations. We see that the targets are also very precise. As we can see, also on the weekly candles, the cycles and targets of the Ichimoku strategy work very well. With a good analysis, you could follow this index for many weeks. Let's check now, with our indicator, how Hosoda's theory of cycles and targets behave on time frames as small as 5 minutes. If we know how to correctly identify an impulse, and the correction, I mean points A, B, C, our indicator easily shows us how far the price could go. Candle corresponds to time, but seems to be suspended in space. Only after adding the intermediate targets do we see how accurately the price reacts at these levels. We can also check the historical data. As always, it is enough to identify an impulse and the correction, our points A, B, and C, to identify with a good probability the point where the price should arrive. In this case, we are dealing with a target V, that is, the distance between point B and C, equal to the distance between point B and our target. Technical tips. If I make a measurement, and I notice that points A, B, C, have not been detected correctly, simply press the modify button, and an element becomes visible, that can be moved on the chart on the candle we want. This allows you to change both the time and target calculations. Press another time modify button, and move the point B and point C. Again modify button and the program automatically recalculates all results. Thank you for your attention.